Good afternoon and hello lovely people. Welcome to the Real Entrepreneurs community. How are you all doing today? Few people joining. I will give you a couple of minutes, just collect my thoughts. Happy Friday to you all. How are we doing on this? I think I always check the weather. Beautiful blue sky out there in East London. How are you doing? Hi Naz, hi, thank you for joining. Hi guys, good to see you. How are we doing this week? Has it been a good week? I think we've had a very good week here. How about you? How are things wherever you are in the world? We've got quite a few people that have told me that they wanted to join, so going to say hello to people as they join. Hi guys, hi MJ. So how are we doing this week? How is your family? How is your business? How is your team if you have one? How are you feeling? How are you feeling this week? The UK is, so tomorrow we are going back, it's being called Super Saturday, so lots of bars and restaurants and several of my clients are opening up today, so it's been really, really busy this week, everybody getting ready and people coming back from being on furlough and lots of activity. So I would say there's a mix of kind of optimism and trepidation, certainly amongst the people that I'm talking to. So let me know how you're doing and what you've been working on. As you know, this group is all about helping you build a business that works for you, and I want to draw your attention to the unit structure in this group. So all of the content in this group, I know there's a lot of different aspects to building and growing a business, and so all the content that we put out in this group is organised now into units, into 6 modules, so it's nice and easy for you to find. So last week we were talking about measuring and what to measure in your business, and we've put that in the systems module. And so today we're going to be talking about managing expectations, different kinds of expectations for different kinds of people, and that's going to go into the synergy module. So it's been a really good week. We had our community event on Tuesday, I think it was, which was really well attended. It was a really great group of people. As always, to be honest, the community events always seem to go really, really well. Lots of good interaction and lots of conversation. And this week was a particularly interesting topic. We were discussing difficult conversations, which is something that, of course, a lot of people are having to get involved in at the moment, and particularly how to deal with kind of drama and conflict at work, but actually quite a lot of other situations were coming up as well, as you might imagine, with people having to work from home and juggle work and life in maybe a bit of a different way. Lots of really, really interesting perspectives and examples came up in the event. We actually even had an expert on this topic that attended the event. So Rob McFun, who is a member of this group, and he wrote a very excellent book called Perfecting Conversations that's got a really clear step-by-step process on how to sort of prepare and have difficult conversations. So it was a really, really good event and lots of interesting examples. So one person spoke about a situation that he'd had with his son that he was kind of rethinking in his head as I was sort of sharing some thoughts and we were discussing that. And we also talked about an upcoming performance review that one of the attendees that was having, that he was concerned about how to handle. And he emailed me afterwards actually to say that it had gone really well. So yeah, a really positive event and a lot of people getting some kind of aha moments from it, which is really great. So our next community event will be on Wednesday the 29th of July. I do hope that you can join us then. So today is all about setting and managing expectations. So this is a really key skill for you as a business owner, and that's because businesses are really shaped by expectations, and that's really what I want you to take away from today. Is expectations are so important. What are the owners' expectations? What are the expectations of shareholders, customers, our teams? And how is the company expected to operate? How is it expected to serve customers? So many different expectations. And actually what I found is that if any facet of your business doesn't meet expectations, then the business will ultimately suffer. And I did quite a bit of research on this when I was writing my book, and what I found in the research that I've done and a lot of the interviews that I conducted when I was writing my book is that one of the biggest sources of anger, mistrust, anxiety is unmet expectations. So expectations not being met in any kind of relationship. And so what I want to give you some thoughts about today, and also hear your thoughts, is how do you set expectations with your customers, with your suppliers, with all the people that you work with? What do you do when they don't get met and maybe you feel disappointed? How do you deal with letting other people down? So this is the topic of today's conversation. And what's interesting is that there's a lot of advice out there about how having low expectations is actually the route to happiness. You know, if you have no expectations, then you'll never get disappointed. And expectations will lead you to heartache and disappointment. And although in some cases that might actually be true, what I would say is that having high expectations is actually the way to keep on improving and keep moving forward and achieving. It's really one of the key ways that we achieve. And so having expectations, I think, is an absolutely normal part of life. It's all about how do we set those and how do we manage those. So I'm definitely not a fan of having no expectations, although I understand the logic behind it. So let's see some of your comments here. So Naz is saying hello, Daniela. A few good questions coming in. I'm going to come to that in just a second. So let me say that many people believe that choice is essential to happiness. And I don't disagree. I think that's actually true. Having choices in our life is really important. But what I would say is that idea of choice has to be coupled with expectations. So they really are a perfect marriage together, and you need to put your choices in with your expectations. And so two very fundamental aspects of running a business are definitely setting appropriate expectations and communicating expectations to all recipients of those expectations. And that's really what I want to cover today. So I'm going to talk about three main people or groups of people that you need to be thinking about in terms of expectations. And then I'm going to share with you some tips on how to set and manage those expectations. So the first person or group of people that I want you to think about is you. And the reason that this is so important is that you are the business owner. And as you know, I'm all about you and helping you build a business that really works for you. And so when you started your business, you clearly had some expectations of that business. Very few people start a new business or a new enterprise expecting it to fail or to have limited financial reward. I don't hear that very often from the entrepreneurs that I'm working with. Most business owners are optimistic by nature. And so your first expectations were probably that the business would be a great success, and also that there would be a lot of financial reward and personal achievement in the setting of your business. So you probably expected that your clients would value your product and service. You probably expected that they would become advocates for your business. You probably expected that your clients would always pay their invoices on time and in full. And you probably also expected that your clients would always be courteous and respectful in all of their dealings with you. And in terms of your suppliers, you probably expected that suppliers would always provide value for money, that they would always deliver what you've ordered from them, that they would never supply faulty goods or services, and that they would always offer you discounts if you were loyal to them. So that's possibly some of the expectations that you had when you started out. But those of you that have been in business for any time at all will know that as business progresses, problems and struggles are absolutely inevitable. And so when our expectations as business owners don't get met, it can lead us as the owners of our businesses to feel frustrated, dissatisfied and despondent. And what I've seen is that often it can lead to people actually falling out of love with their business. So that's about our expectations as business owners. And there's some great questions coming in, but just give me a second, I will come to those, I promise. The second group that I want you to think about in terms of expectations is our customers. So what do customers really expect from you and from your company? Actually, I would go so far as to say this is such an important question that if you succeed in answering that question, what they really expect from you, and then you manage to deliver on those expectations, you're a good chunk of the way to building a really successful business. Expectations, of course, come with pros and cons. High expectations from your customers can hurt your business if you're always trying to achieve better and better. It can sometimes be a huge strain on your business, but actually it might help you win those customers in the first place. And so it's always a bit of a balance. Here are some expectations that your customers might have of you and your business. They expect you to solve the problem that they came to you with. They expect that somebody will always be available to assist them. They expect respect from all of the employees and people that work with you in your company. They also expect courtesy. They probably expect smiles from everybody they deal with in your company and kindness. And they also expect to be able to trust you and your people to deliver what you say you're going to do. They expect to feel encouraged and happy about buying something from you in general. They expect you and your people to be honest with them, even if you think they're not going to like what you tell them. They do definitely expect you to fulfill all of your promises with regards to your product and service and the delivery of that. And maybe they have an expectation that you will deliver a bit above and beyond what they expect, which is very difficult to do. They expect high quality service, and they expect you to feel ownership of solving that problem that they came to you with in the first place. They expect loyalty from you if you want loyalty from them, so they expect that to be a two-way street. And they also expect you to get to know them really well. Now that's quite a long list of expectations, and those are just the ones that I've come up with. You've probably got more to add in your experience. What do your customers expect from you? And hopefully just from that list and now thinking about what do your customers really expect from you, hopefully you can see how important it is to get this right. Sales expectations are actually often the most easy ones to spot. So when the business development teams or the sales teams set inappropriate expectations in order to make a sale, then there's always going to be fallout. And many of you will have seen that in your businesses. If you set the wrong expectation in order to get a sale and then you're not able to deliver on it, you'll have a very unhappy customer. And so salespeople actually have what I would call a really unique privilege actually, in terms of it's their job to set those appropriate expectations with new customers. And the reason that I use that word privilege is that because as that salesperson, through appropriate expectation setting, you can really set the whole company up and the whole relationship up for success. And in particular, you enable the delivery function in your business, whatever that might be, the operational bit of the business. The salesperson really has the ability to make that team really shine in the eyes of the customer. And they do that by communicating how that operational team is going to deliver to the customer. So setting those customers' expectations, super important. Now, most sales professionals are driven by how much they can sell. That's how they're wired. That's why they're so good at their job. In other words, it's a very common pitfall for salespeople and business development people to kind of overstate the company's ability to deliver in order for them to make a sale, because they're very focused on making the sale. And that is one of the most common pitfalls, expectation mismatch, if you like, that certainly I see and in my experience happens in terms of expectations. And while it might appear to be a sort of a short-term financial gain, in the long term, both in terms of profit but also in terms of your reputation, it can be really, really challenging. And the reason that I'm talking about salespeople is that I know in a lot of cases, you as business owners, you're your best salesperson in your business. And so it's really important for you to understand how important that expectation setting is with your customers. Now, as a business owner, obviously, you've probably got good, or you've had to learn how to say no. Saying no in your business is actually a great way of building a good relationship with a customer, because if you're able to say no to your customer, then when you say yes, then they really believe it and they really value it, and it gives credibility, if you like, to that yes. A buyer wants to know what they're buying, and so it's really important when you hire the next salesperson and you're training them up to do the job that you have been doing, that you remember that instinctively as the business owner, you've probably got a better sense of that balance in your company than a salesperson does. Because even though you might be your business's best salesperson, you're also very, very conscious of the delivery function. That might also be you, so then that balance is much easier to strike. But as you grow and you take on more people, the sales function and the delivery function will end up being two different people, or eventually two different teams. And that is when expectation setting becomes even more important. What happens if salespeople set false expectations? That's what gives them the poor reputation, and we all know those sort of stereotypes of the sort of sleazy salesperson that promises and then you never get the delivery. And that's also what creates cynical buyers. And you will know that in most industries that you're all operating in, buyers have become very, very cynical. And unfortunately, that is because salespeople have failed to do a good job in terms of setting expectations. So I promise I'll come on to how we do this and how we do this better. But the third group of people, I mentioned that there were three. So the first one is definitely yourself. The second one is customers. And the third one, of course, is your team. And the first member of your team is possibly a business partner. And so I want to start with that. And this is where I see so many mistakes being made in terms of business partnership. So often business partnerships begin with pre-existing relationships. And often actually I would encourage that, because you need to build up a certain level of trust between normally two or three parties before you agree to go into business together. And so that's great, and you need that level of trust. But unfortunately, what happens when you have trust between, let's say, two individuals, is a lot of people make the mistake of then assuming, because you trust each other, that your expectations are aligned. And what I see in a lot of business partnerships is that's just not the case. So the parties actually don't want the same thing. They don't have the same expectation in terms of how many hours you're going to work, what effort you're going to put in, even the strategy around the business. And so where there are those misaligned expectations, and I see that a lot, then the trust that has been built up in the beginning, or even before you started that partnership, it quickly diminishes. So mismatched expectations will quickly erode any trust between business partners, and of course that's the same with your customers as well. And so what typically happens, and what I see happening, is either one partner isn't perceived as carrying like equal weight, carrying their weight in the partnership, or maybe one partner is making decisions that aren't in alignment with the other, so the way they're making decisions, or even the actual decisions they're making, there's a mismatch there. Or maybe financial spending is not agreed upon, etc., etc. There's a very, very long list that I could give you there, and I'm sure that any of you that are in partnership with anybody else, you know what I mean. It's so important to get those expectations aligned. The list is very, very long, as I mentioned, of those expectations that can potentially be mismatched, and it really can derail a company. So you can go into business with your friend, with your partner, with your wife, with your husband, with your father, with your mother, with your child, and it all starts out so great, and very quickly tensions can come in, disagreements can come in, and it's all about the root of that is all about mismatched expectations. And so when I said to you at the beginning that expectations really are at the core of the business, I really meant it. So now if we talk about your team, culture also is really built upon expectations if you think about it. So we define culture as, if you like, the way that a company does business, the way it conducts itself, the way it behaves. Many things, of course, can shape culture, and it does morph over time. And a lot of people don't really realise that, that we're building the culture in our businesses, but it really does change over time. So technology can shape culture. The people clearly have a huge impact on culture. Markets and customers and competition can shape your culture. But I would argue that actually the biggest impact on culture is actually expectations. And so what is expected from your team will absolutely shape the culture that forms within your company and how they conduct themselves on a daily basis. So I'll give you some examples. If a company has a market culture, then growth is the expectation. Whereas if you have an expectation of control, then you will end up having a hierarchical culture. Whereas when a company has a kind of a clan culture, if you like, then loyalty and teamwork become very much part of that culture. In a small business particularly, the owner really sets the culture through their own expectations. And this is why it's so important. You, as the owner of your business, by the expectations that you have of your people, you are setting and defining and shaping the culture of your business as it grows. And so whilst expectations alone don't create the culture, as I mentioned, there are many other things, they certainly really, really influence how that culture is shaped and how it changes over time. So we've talked now about 3 of the key kind of individuals or groups that you definitely need to focus on in terms of expectations. So that's yourself, your customers, and your team, including a business partner if you have one, or business partners. So now, how do we set and how do we manage expectations? Now, you know me by now, I like to keep things very nice and simple. And so firstly, we need to be really aware of the expectations. Are they appropriate and are they proportionate? And if not, then we need to really tackle that up front. Maybe our expectations of somebody else, maybe they're too high. Or maybe they're not high enough. So what are your expectations of the people that you're dealing with? The people in your team, your customers, your suppliers. The first thing is to become aware of what your expectations are. But also, what are the expectations that are being put on you? Are they realistic? Are they clear? If not, then we need to say something. And actually, of all the steps I'm going to talk to you about, this is actually probably the most crucial one, because once we're aware of the expectations we're putting on other people or they're putting on us, then we can take action. Now, clearly, I am a business coach and I'm talking to you about this in a business context, but I'm sure that many of you are already having that light bulb moment of, oh my goodness, this also works in other relationships, in other kinds of scenarios that we find ourselves in outside of the business. So I'll let you think about that as I go through this. I'm going to reserve my comments for the business expectations, if you don't mind, but this can also apply very definitely to other situations that we find ourselves in. So once we are aware of those expectations that we are putting on others or that they're putting on us, if you like, then communication absolutely is key. And I want to talk a little bit about verbal and written communication, because I often get asked this question. And it's really important to talk to people, because any other form of communication can be very quickly misinterpreted. If you write an email or you send a message and I receive that from you, I'm not receiving the tone, I'm not receiving the nuance, I'm not getting any body language, I'm just getting the words. And so particularly when we're talking about expectations, I would urge you very definitely to make sure that you're having a conversation. If it's possible to have it face to face or with the video camera on, again, I would definitely recommend that. But even being on the phone with somebody is definitely much better than doing this by email. So very, very important to have the communication and to ask lots and lots of questions. But I would also say that it is then important to put things in writing. And so what I like to do is have a conversation with somebody and then follow up with an email, because that gives people the opportunity then to go, no, that's not what we agreed, Lisa, or that's not what I said, or that's not, you haven't said that correctly, or you know, you've put that in maybe in a way that I wouldn't agree with. So I think it's really important to have both. And what I would urge you and what I would say that I have learned over the years is that people do not remember. If I go back to the business partner situation that I was talking about, you go into business with somebody and maybe you have these conversations. Let's hope you do, and I'll come on to in a second what kind of conversations I'm talking about, but maybe you have that conversation and maybe you think you're both going to remember. But I tell you what, in a few months and especially in a few years, when you've been working long hours, maybe there's quite a lot of stress, you've had those ups and downs of the wonderful entrepreneurial journey, I promise you, you will not remember the same things. You will have a different memory of that conversation. Now, it is true that even if you put something in writing, two people can interpret that document in different ways. So I'm not actually talking about anything fancy and legal. It's more about the intent that you had when you had that conversation and putting it down in writing and at least agreeing when you're both friends. It's much better if you do it at that point rather than trying to figure out what you both meant several months in when you're under pressure, as I say, and there's all the stress and tension of running a business. So definitely communication, absolutely key to setting expectations appropriately. And so what are we communicating about? So what we're communicating about is what are your expectations and what are the expectations of the other person. And this is the same whether we're talking about a customer, a supplier, a member of your team, a business partner, whoever you're talking about. What are your expectations? Be really clear. And what are their expectations? Really clear verbal communication and written. Really super important. Even if you're like, oh my God, we've been friends for 20 years, we don't have to write this down, write it down. One piece of paper, sign it, put it in the drawer, you might never need to use it. Trust me, it'll be worth its weight in gold one day if you need it. Just makes it so much easier. Now, you'll notice when I'm saying all this that I'm really emphasising the upfront part of this. So I see a lot of people getting into trouble in terms of setting expectations with their customers, with their teams, with their suppliers, with their business partner, because they're trying to have the conversation after the event. And it's so much more difficult. So have the conversations up front. So much easier when you're just signing up with a new customer and you're excited to be working together. What are the expectations that we are setting? What expectations do we have of each other? And so when you see people getting into trouble, it's because they haven't done this up front. And what happens then if you don't do that upfront is, as I say, you have mismatched expectations. So your customer might be expecting X and you might be expecting to deliver Y, and there is a mismatch in expectation. And one of the reasons why this happens, I find, is that people go into too much detail too soon. Let me explain what I mean by that. So for example, if a manager asks someone to do something, a lot of people just get on with it, even if they don't agree. And those of you that have teams or people working with you, I'd urge you to think about that. You ask somebody to do something or you tell them to do something. And a lot of people, depending on how they're wired, they'll just get on and do it. They won't necessarily think about why you have asked them to do what you've asked them to do. And so it's actually really important to give context around an expectation. So a really great question is, what are we trying to achieve here? So if somebody asks you something, asks you to do something, or you ask somebody else to do something, have you understood the context? Do you understand what they're trying to achieve here? Or are we going down into a level of detail where we're losing what the actual goal or what the actual objective is. So much easier to understand expectations if we have them in a context of what is the objective, what is the result we're trying to achieve here. And actually this is really important when you're trying to manage your own expectations. So setting clear goals will really help you as a business owner manage your own expectations. So maybe you've got an amount of money or a number of customers that you want to achieve. But what I would say to you is that is just the start, and please don't stop there. Whatever goals you set for yourself, you need to work backwards. You need to think about in terms of steps or milestones. So, okay, I want to achieve X number of customers. What do I need to do to get there? Yeah, I want to achieve this amount of money by this date. What are the steps? Because just having a goal, brilliant. So you set yourself a goal, I'm going to make £100,000 this year, and then you fail. And then you give yourself a hard time, and then you're disappointed, and then you fall out of love with your business. Did you actually break down how you were going to get to that number? Yeah, I want to get 10 more customers. How are we going to do that? It's all about the steps, really, really important. And that will help you manage your own expectations. As I mentioned, most business owners are optimistic, and that's a brilliant quality, and confidence is a great quality in a business owner. But you do need to manage your own expectations so that you don't get disappointed and deflated, and so that you don't fall out of love with your business. When you work backwards from a goal, you actually are reframing those expectations with yourself, and that's why it works. And then you avoid, as I say, the disappointment and giving yourself a hard time. And it's absolutely the same with customers and suppliers, and it's the same with your team. So you might agree with a customer that you are going to deliver them this result, but let's break it down into steps. Yeah, so that they understand the process, and so that you understand the process, and you make sure that you're on the same page. Yeah, super important. The more detailed, actually, the better. So that might sound a bit counterintuitive. Earlier on, I talked about the danger of detail. You've got to get the context first, and then you've got to go into the detail. That's how this works. And super, super important, and my last tip on this subject is scenarios. So please, please, please talk about what you're going to do when things go wrong, or if they go wrong. Again, that's what happens so often with business partnerships, is you don't have that conversation. When I meet business partners, I always ask them, have you had a conversation about what happens if one of you changes your mind? Have you had a conversation about what happens if one of you gets pregnant, or their partner gets pregnant, or you decide that you want to go off and do something else, or you get seriously ill, or worse? Like, what's going to happen in those scenarios? It's so much easier to have those conversations when you're friends, and when you're happy, and when you're smiling at each other. And it's the same with customers. What are we going to do if we don't hit a milestone? What are we going to do if the goalposts move? What are we going to do in these different scenarios? Just be confident and honest and open, and explore scenarios with your suppliers and customers. It will give them confidence, yeah? It will make them realise that you're doing a thorough job. Otherwise, you're setting an expectation that you might not be able to meet, and you're setting yourself up for a fall and for disappointment. Now, of course, expectations can shift over time, of course they can. But being clear about what they are will help you notice that, and that is the point, and it will help you reset. And I would urge you, as soon as you notice something going off track, have the conversation. So this, what I have described to you here, is a bit circular, yeah? It's about continually having clarity, and it's about that continual communication. Yeah, it's about checking in with your customer. I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago, having a simple RAG status. How are we doing? Am I meeting your expectations? What a great question. Hello, Mr. Customer, am I meeting your expectations? No? Okay, in what way? Have the conversation with your customers. Check in with them regularly. That is the way the relationship is built, and that's actually the way that you meet those expectations that I was talking about earlier on, that you know your customer, that you're in tune with them, that you want to add value to them. So what I would strongly suggest in terms of expectations, and this came up in terms of having difficult conversations, and it's coming up again today. Do not put your head in the sand. The longer you leave it, the more of the difficult conversation it will be, and then we'll be back in the drama triangle, which is what we were talking about on Tuesday. So be really clear about the expectations, be clear about your own expectations and everybody else's, and just check in with people regularly. That would be my advice. If you take one thing away from today, that would be my advice. Check the expectations all the time. So in summary, be clear about the expectation, yours and others. Communicate verbally and in writing. Verbally first, then in writing. Put those expectations into context. What are we trying to achieve here, so that you can understand, not just, oh yes, I've got your expectation, I've written it down. Understand why, what are we trying to achieve here. Break down the path to that objective or that result into steps. And finally, consider scenarios, particularly what happens if and when things go wrong. Things always go wrong, I don't need to tell you that, right? Things don't go according to plan. So let's have that conversation up front and decide what we're going to do about it. So much better. So they are my thoughts on setting and managing expectations. What do you think? How do you manage them in your business? And do you have any questions for me about setting expectations, managing expectations? As I mentioned on Tuesday, people were relating what I was talking about in terms of having difficult conversations to home situations, to relationships, to all different kinds of situations. So actually everything I've shared with you pretty much today can be applied throughout your life. It is all about owning your shit, if I can say that. Of course I can. Owning your own stuff, yeah? So what are your expectations? And being really clear about that, but also asking plenty of questions. I said to you on many occasions before that as managers and leaders, we think our job is to tell, and actually I would encourage you more and more that your job is to ask. Ask more. If in doubt, ask a question, and if in doubt, ask another question. So I'm going to close up today's live with 2 quotes. And the first one is from Eric Holtzclaw. Great names. I do seem to find some good names for my quotes. So Eric Holtzclaw, he is a serial entrepreneur, and what he said about expectations is the breakdown in all human relations is unstated expectations. And I think he's got a point. The second is from Les Brown, the absolutely legendary motivational speaker. No one rises to low expectations. And I completely agree also. So I don't want you to take from this live today that we shouldn't have high standards, that we shouldn't have high expectations. Of course we should. But the trick is, and the key to this is, that we must communicate those expectations so that everybody is clear and also put them in context. So let me know your thoughts and questions on this or any other topic relating to how to grow a business that works for you. And let me know also if there are any areas of business growth, business development, business management that you would like me to speak about in a future live. And as always, whatever you're doing this weekend and whoever you're doing it with, I wish you a very happy and a very peaceful time. And as always, if you want to talk, you know where I am. Take care, stay safe, and do keep in touch. Bye for now. Have a good weekend.